What if I told you that simply spending too much time outside Canada could put your old age security payments at risk, even if you're a Canadian citizen? Imagine this. You've worked hard your entire life, you've retired, you're receiving CPP and OAS every month, and you decide to spend several months with family overseas or escape the Canadian winter. Everything seems perfectly normal. Then one day, your OAS payment suddenly stops, or you receive a letter asking for additional information about your residency. At that moment, you're left wondering, what did I do wrong? The shocking part is that many Canadian seniors don't realize that living outside Canada for an extended period can affect their OAS in certain situations. And if you also receive the Guaranteed Income Supplement, the consequences can be even more significant because GIS has different residency rules than OAS. This isn't about creating fear, it's about understanding the rules before they catch you by surprise. Every year, thousands of Canadian seniors travel abroad for family visits, retirement, or extended vacations without fully understanding how residency requirements can affect their benefits. The good news is that knowing the rules in advance can help you avoid unnecessary stress and make informed decisions before you travel. In today's video, I'll explain who can continue receiving OAS while living abroad, when payments may stop, how this connects to CPP and GIS, and the simple steps every Canadian senior should take before spending more than 6 months outside Canada. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what the official rules are, who is affected, who is not, and how to protect the retirement benefits you've spent your entire working life earning. So, before you book your next extended trip outside Canada, make sure you understand these important rules that many Canadian seniors don't discover until it's already too late. Have you ever thought about spending a few months outside Canada after retirement? Maybe your children live overseas. Maybe you enjoy escaping the Canadian winter and staying somewhere warmer. Or perhaps you've always dreamed of traveling for an extended period now that you're retired. For many Canadian seniors, this sounds like the perfect retirement plan. After all, you've spent decades working, paying taxes, and contributing to Canada. You naturally expect your retirement benefits to continue while you enjoy this new chapter of life. But here's what many people don't realize. The rules surrounding old age security are not always as straightforward as they seem, especially if you plan to live outside Canada for more than 6 months. In some situations, your OAS payments may continue without interruption. In others, your eligibility could depend on how long you've lived in Canada after turning 18, whether Canada has an international social security agreement with the country where you're living, and whether you also receive income-tested benefits, like the Guaranteed Income Supplement. That's why understanding these rules before you leave Canada is far more important than trying to solve problems after you're already abroad. One of the biggest misconceptions among Canadian seniors is that Canadian citizenship alone guarantees uninterrupted OAS payments anywhere in the world. While citizenship is certainly important, OAS is actually based on residency requirements established under the Old Age Security Act. Many people confuse OAS with the Canada Pension Plan because both programs are paid monthly and are often deposited into the same bank account. However, they are completely different programs with different eligibility rules. CPP is based primarily on the contributions you made during your working years. OAS, on the other hand, is funded through general government revenues and is closely tied to your years of residence in Canada. That distinction becomes especially important if you decide to spend long periods outside the country. According to the Government of Canada, millions of Canadians receive old age security every month, making it one of the country's largest retirement benefit programs. At the same time, many of these seniors also receive CPP and, depending on their income, the Guaranteed Income Supplement. Because these programs often arrive together, many people assume they follow exactly the same rules. They don't. That's where confusion begins. A change that has no effect on CPP could still affect GIS eligibility. Likewise, spending extended time outside Canada may have different consequences for OAS than for CPP. Understanding those differences is essential because relying on assumptions instead of official program rules can lead to unnecessary stress later. Another important point is that retirement today looks very different than it did 20 or 30 years ago. Years ago, most retirees remained in the same Canadian community throughout retirement. Today, many seniors divide their time between Canada and another country. Some spend winters in warmer climates. Others move closer to children or grandchildren who now live overseas. Some even split the year between two countries. These changing retirement lifestyles are one reason why questions about OAS residency have become increasingly common. Service Canada regularly answers questions from seniors who want to know whether they can continue receiving benefits while living abroad. The answer depends on several factors, including your residency history and your individual circumstances, not simply the number of months you spend outside Canada. This is also where many people make an expensive mistake. They assume that because their friend continued receiving OAS while living abroad, the exact same rule automatically applies to them. Unfortunately, every situation is different. Two retirees living in the same country can have completely different outcomes depending on how many years they lived in Canada after age 18, whether they qualify under an international social security agreement, and whether they receive additional benefits like GIS. That's why comparing your situation with someone else's can sometimes create false confidence. The only information that truly matters is how the official rules apply to your personal circumstances. Another reason this topic deserves attention is because many Canadian seniors don't realize how closely government records work together. When you receive retirement benefits, Service Canada maintains information about your eligibility, while the Canada Revenue Agency continues to administer your tax records. Although these departments have different responsibilities, the information they use often overlaps. Your residency status, your income, your mailing address, and your personal details all play important roles in ensuring that benefits are administered correctly. That's why keeping your information up to date is always a smart idea, especially before leaving Canada for an extended period. Canadians who regularly work with retirement financial planners usually hear about these rules well before making travel plans. Their advisors explain how OAS, CPP, GIS, taxes, and residency requirements fit together, so there are no surprises later. Most Canadian seniors, however, don't have that advantage. They often discover these rules only after they've already booked flights, relocated temporarily, or received an unexpected letter asking for additional information. The purpose of today's video is to help you understand these rules before they become a problem. Over the next few minutes, I'll explain exactly who can continue receiving OAS while living outside Canada, who may be affected by the 6-month rule, how this connects to CPP and GIS, and the practical steps you should take before leaving the country so your retirement plans are based on facts rather than assumptions. Many Canadian seniors ask the same question before making long-term travel plans. If I spend more than 6 months outside Canada, will my old age security automatically stop? The answer is not as simple as yes or no, and that's exactly why so many people become confused. The length of time you spend outside Canada is only one part of the picture. What matters just as much is your residency history, how many years you've lived in Canada after the age of 18, and whether you meet the conditions that allow OAS to continue while you're living abroad. This is why two retirees can make the exact same trip and have completely different experiences. One may continue receiving payments without interruption, while another may need to provide additional information or discover that different rules apply to their personal situation. One of the biggest misunderstandings comes from confusing the Canada Pension Plan with old age security. Although both payments often arrive around the same time each month, they are completely different programs. CPP is based on the contributions you made throughout your working life. If you contributed to the plan while working in Canada, your eligibility is tied to those contributions. OAS is different because it is based largely on your years of residence in Canada. That distinction becomes extremely important when someone decides to live outside the country for an extended period. Many seniors assume that because CPP continues, OAS must follow exactly the same rules. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, and misunderstanding that difference can lead to unnecessary confusion. Another important issue that rarely receives enough attention is the Guaranteed Income Supplement. Many Canadian seniors receive GIS in addition to their OAS because it provides extra support for lower income retirees. However, GIS has its own residency requirements that are different from OAS. This means a senior who continues receiving OAS while living abroad may not necessarily continue receiving GIS under the same circumstances. This is one of the hidden connections that many people never hear about until they begin researching their own situation. Understanding how these programs interact is essential before making plans to leave Canada for several months. There is another factor that deserves careful attention, and that is your communication with Service Canada. If you plan to spend an extended period outside the country, it is always a good idea to ensure that your personal information is completely up to date. Your mailing address, direct deposit information, telephone number, and contact details should all be accurate. Government departments occasionally need to contact benefit recipients regarding routine administrative matters, and missing an important letter because it was sent to an old address can create unnecessary delays. Even if your benefits are not affected, failing to receive important correspondence can make resolving future questions much more difficult. Many retirement advisors recommend reviewing your My Service Canada account before leaving Canada for an extended period. This allows you to confirm that your information is correct, verify your banking details, and review any notices that may already be waiting in your account. Canadians who regularly work with financial planners often complete this review every year because they understand that preventing problems is much easier than fixing them after they occur. Most Canadian seniors, however, never receive that advice. Instead, they often learn about these administrative details only after they encounter an unexpected issue. Another point that deserves attention is the role of the Canada Revenue Agency. While CRA does not determine your eligibility for old age security, your tax information remains an important part of your overall retirement planning. Filing your income tax return every year helps ensure that government records remain current and that income-tested benefits are calculated correctly. If you receive the Guaranteed Income Supplement, keeping your tax information up to date becomes even more important because annual income is used to determine eligibility. Many retirees assume that moving abroad removes the need to think about Canadian tax obligations, but depending on your circumstances, that assumption may not always be correct. Understanding your responsibilities before you travel is one of the best ways to avoid unexpected surprises later. This is where many Canadian seniors unknowingly make a costly mistake. They assume that because a friend continued receiving benefits while living overseas, the exact same outcome will apply to them. Unfortunately, retirement benefits do not work that way. Every person's residency history, contribution record, income level, and personal circumstances are different. Comparing your situation with someone else's can create a false sense of security. Instead, decisions about living abroad should always be based on your own eligibility and the official information provided by Service Canada. The encouraging news is that most of these issues can be avoided with a little preparation. Before making long-term travel plans, take the time to review your personal information, understand how OAS, CPP, and GIS differ from one another, and make sure you know which rules apply to your own circumstances. A few minutes of preparation today can help you avoid unnecessary stress tomorrow. In the next part of this video, I'll explain the hidden connection between these programs that most people never hear about, the simple steps you should take before leaving Canada, and the practical actions that can help protect your retirement benefits while you're abroad. Many Canadian seniors are surprised to learn that the biggest risk is not necessarily leaving Canada for several months. The real risk is leaving without understanding how your personal circumstances fit into the OAS rules. Two people can travel to the same country for the same amount of time and have completely different outcomes. One person may continue receiving their old age security without interruption, while another may need to provide additional information to confirm their eligibility. That's why relying on advice from friends, neighbors, or social media can sometimes create unnecessary confusion. The only information that truly matters is how the official rules apply to your individual situation. Another important point that often gets overlooked is the connection between OAS and the Guaranteed Income Supplement. While OAS may continue to be paid outside Canada for eligible recipients, GIS follows different residency requirements. Many seniors assume that because they continue receiving OAS, their GIS will automatically continue as well. However, GIS is intended for low-income seniors living in Canada, and extended absences can affect eligibility. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings surrounding retirement benefits because people naturally assume that all monthly payments follow exactly the same rules. In reality, each program has its own purpose, its own eligibility requirements, and its own administrative policies. Understanding these differences before making travel plans can prevent unexpected surprises later. There is also an important tax consideration that many retirees never think about. Depending on your residency status for tax purposes, living outside Canada for an extended period may change how your income is reported or how certain tax rules apply. That doesn't automatically mean you'll lose your benefits, but it does mean your overall financial situation could become more complicated than expected. This is why many financial planners recommend reviewing both your Service Canada records and your CRA information before making any long-term plans to live abroad. Taking care of these details before you leave is much easier than trying to resolve questions after you're already outside the country. Another mistake many seniors make is assuming that because they informed one government department about their move, every other department automatically receives the same information. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. If you change your mailing address, banking information, or contact details, make sure the appropriate government records are updated. Keeping your information current helps ensure that important letters, payment notices, and requests for additional information reach you without unnecessary delays. Missing an official notice because it was mailed to an old address can create problems that take weeks to resolve. Canadians who regularly work with retirement specialists usually review these details every year. Their advisors remind them to verify their residency information, update their personal records, review their tax situation, and understand how one government program can affect another. Most Canadian seniors never receive that type of advice. Instead, they often learn about these requirements only after encountering an unexpected issue. That's why staying informed before making major retirement decisions is one of the smartest things you can do. If you're planning to spend an extended period outside Canada, it's also worth reviewing whether the country you'll be living in has a Social Security agreement with Canada. These international agreements can affect how certain benefits are administered and may help determine your eligibility under specific circumstances. Again, the rules depend on your individual history and should never be based on assumptions or someone else's experience. Every retirement situation is unique, and taking the time to understand your own circumstances can make a significant difference. The good news is that most of these issues are completely preventable. You don't need to become an expert in government legislation. You simply need to know which questions to ask before you travel. Confirm your eligibility, review your residency history, make sure your personal information is accurate, and understand how OAS, CPP, GIS, and CRA records work together. A little preparation today can save you from unnecessary stress months later. In the next and final part of this video, I'll show you the 3 simple steps every Canadian senior should take before leaving Canada for an extended period, explain how to verify your information through official government resources, discuss an important scam warning that every retiree should know, and answer one question that almost every Canadian senior asks before deciding to live abroad. These final steps only take a few minutes, but they can help you travel with greater confidence, knowing you've done everything possible to protect the retirement benefits you've worked so hard to earn. Now let's talk about the hidden connection that many videos never explain. Most people think of CPP, OAS, GIS, and the CRA as completely separate programs, but in reality, they're more connected than they appear. While each program has its own rules, they all rely on accurate personal information and government records. That's why a simple change in your circumstances can sometimes affect more than one benefit. For example, if you move abroad and fail to update your contact information, you could miss an important letter from Service Canada requesting additional information about your eligibility. If that request goes unanswered because it was sent to an old mailing address, resolving the issue may take much longer than expected. The problem isn't necessarily that you left Canada. The problem is that the government couldn't reach you when it needed to. Another connection many seniors overlook involves the Guaranteed Income Supplement. As we discussed earlier, GIS has different residency requirements from old age security. Some retirees continue receiving OAS while living outside Canada, but discover that GIS follows different rules. This surprises many people because both payments often arrive together every month, creating the impression that they operate exactly the same way. They don't. That's why it's so important to understand which benefits you receive and what requirements apply to each one before making long-term travel plans. There's also another important point that deserves attention. Many Canadians who spend extended periods abroad continue to file Canadian income tax returns and maintain strong ties to Canada. Others may establish different residency arrangements depending on their personal circumstances. These situations can become more complex than most people expect, especially when taxes, government benefits, and residency rules all intersect. This doesn't automatically mean you'll lose your benefits or face penalties, but it does mean you should understand your obligations before making major decisions. A short conversation with Service Canada or a qualified tax professional before you leave can often answer questions that would otherwise create unnecessary stress months later. So, what should you do before planning an extended stay outside Canada? First, review your My Service Canada account and confirm that your mailing address, banking information, phone number, and email address are all current. Second, make sure your income tax filings with the Canada Revenue Agency are completely up to date, particularly if you receive income-tested benefits such as the Guaranteed Income Supplement. Third, if you expect to be outside Canada for an extended period, contact Service Canada before you travel and ask how the rules apply to your individual situation. Every retirement case is different, and getting information directly from the source is always better than relying on assumptions. One more important reminder before we finish. Unfortunately, scammers often target Canadian seniors by pretending to represent Service Canada or the Canada Revenue Agency. They may claim your benefits are about to stop unless you make an immediate payment or provide sensitive personal information over the phone. Remember this: Service Canada and the CRA will never demand payment through gift cards, cryptocurrency, or wire transfers, and they will never threaten immediate arrest if you don't comply. If you receive a suspicious call, hang up immediately and report it to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Protecting your personal information is just as important as protecting your retirement benefits. The goal of today's video isn't to make you worry about traveling or spending time with family outside Canada. It's to make sure you understand the rules before making important decisions. The more informed you are, the easier it becomes to enjoy your retirement with confidence. Whether you're planning to spend 6 months abroad or simply exploring your options, taking a little time to verify your eligibility, review your records, and understand how OAS, CPP, GIS, and CRA requirements work together can save you from unnecessary stress later. Knowledge is one of the best investments you can make in protecting the retirement benefits you've worked so hard to earn.